who is, well, not just from the Sheffield Buddhist Centre, but currently in it. Well, Aryadasa is, becoming a really good friend of mine. And one of the things that immediately comes to my mind when I think of Aryadasa is a man who's very interested in what I might call the heroic ideal. Aryadasa responds to values and truth and meaning, and sometimes sort of very strongly and at quite a sort of high, challenging, adventurous, heroic level. Yesterday, Aryadasa in a team meeting was talking about this lecture, The Taste of Freedom, and I think he said something like, Sangharakshita is just a boss, and it's just like gets right to what life is about, and it's going to keep me going. And I was just like, yeah, that is how Aryadasa is. He's sort of warm and energetic and serious, and responds to the kind of heroic in life, and really wants to make the most of it. So over to you, Aryadasa in the Sheffield Buddhist Centre.
Thank you very much, Shantakara, for that very generous introduction. I just checked that I can be heard. People give me a nod. Brilliant, very good. So I'm broadcasting from the Sheffield Buddhist Centre, and I've got some great friends with me, which is really, really helpful. And cast on the wall all your faces. So you're currently being projected on the wall, bigger than life size. So it's really, really nice to see you all as well. So if I look up that way, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at your faces. I'm not having one of those deep, meaningful looks and pauses. So I'll jump straight in as well. So I'm looking at from vagueness to clarity. So this third fetter. And in the lecture, Sangharakshita doesn't say that many words about it, but what he does say is extremely punchy. So I'm just going to start by reading that. So the fetter of vagueness. So vague means indistinct, not clearly expressed or identified, of uncertain or ill-defined meaning or character. So why should anyone be vague? The fact is we are vague when we are undecided, vague when we don't want to decide, and above all, vague when we don't want to commit ourselves. Our vagueness is therefore a dishonest vagueness. And then he goes on to say, breaking the fetter of vagueness means being willing to think clearly. So being willing to think clearly. So the opposite of vagueness is clarity. It means giving time to thinking things out, having the determination to think things through. It means being prepared to look at what the alternatives really are and to sort out one's priorities. It means being ready to make up one's mind. Okay, so that's from Sangharakshita. And I'll just spend the next bit of time unpacking that in my own words, and I guess in my own experience. So this is a sort of aspect, a facet of the Dharma I've been particularly interested in. And I think I'll add into this definition of vagueness of one of the reasons why we do it. I think it's a method to deal with suffering, So we're vague, so we don't have to deal with suffering. And I came across this great word, which is obfuscate, to obfuscate. And that means to make obscure, to make unclear, to make unintelligible. So it's an action of making things obscure because you don't want to deal with them. So you just kind of like descend the fog. And I think that's a method to deal with suffering, and not a very effective one. So I'll just give you a little bit of an idea about where I've come from in terms of vagueness and clarity. So just a very, very short story of when I started university. So I came to Sheffield. So I'm from Stoke originally, although I don't tell many people that. I try and pretend I'm from Yorkshire. So I'm from Stoke. And so I came to university and I was doing a biology degree. And then I looked at the courses that the university does, and I realized biology wasn't one of them. So I'd forgotten what course I'd signed up for. And so I looked down the list and I saw animal and plant science, and I thought, yeah, it's sort of like biology, so I'll just go for that. So I went to all these lectures for a week where I was on none of the registers and basically just followed people around, just in a sort of vague, ghost-like haze, until on the Friday of that week, I thought, oh, I'm probably doing the wrong course. And then it occurred to me I could go back and check my letters and find out, yes, I was indeed signed up for molecular biology, not animal and plant science. So, you know, that, and that basically didn't surprise me. That's how I used to live my life, as sort of ghost around in a kind of vague, unclear fashion, and doing nothing much in particular other than like following people. And then I met the Dharma, which was extremely helpful. And then about 4 or 5 years later, I joined the order. And then I came back from my ordination retreat. And my first retreat I was on was at Aryadasa, and it was with a great mammoth of an order member called Subhuti, and he led a seminar over the weekend. And I was back from a long retreat. I'd done a lot of meditation, a lot of really good communication, been in really good community. So I was very kind of robust, I guess. And then Subhuti said something that I'll never forget. He said, "You need to learn how to think." It wasn't just to me; it was to the audience. But I took it very personally. You need to learn how to think because you don't know how to think, and if you don't know how to think, you can't spot views, and if you can't spot views, you can't practice the Dharma. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, I have no idea what I think. Like, what I think is a total mystery to me. And I think the reason that I could think that was because, well, I'd practiced a lot of metta, so it wasn't like a harsh realization. It was a realization that, well, in a way, there was so much that I could transform. Yeah. So I basically realized I was a complete idiot, but in a way that was surrounded by metta enough for me to transform. So yeah, really, really helpful to practice metta if you want to go in for this wisdom perspective, this clarity. Yeah, another way to describe learning how to think is learning how to taste freedom. So learning what it tastes like in your experience. What does it taste like? Because there's freedom, and then there's things that taste like freedom, but are something else. Like, I can't believe it's not freedom, or just like it's just a bit off. And basically, you are what you eat. So if you eat freedom, you'll become free, and if you eat something else, it's just you become something else. And often it's not immediately apparent what the difference is. So it's subtle work. It's a long game. Okay, so how to do this? So I've got an image for this, just to change the metaphor slightly from taste. A few days ago, I got really interested in puppets and pictures of puppets, which was a bit of a surprise to me. But I've learned to kind of go with these sort of whims. So I was like, okay, I like puppets now. So I was looking at these puppets, and basically what I realized, what I was attracted to was, in fact, puppets are controlled by strings. Yeah, so they're controlled from the external, from the outside. And I realized how much I am like that. I've got my own puppet strings, and how much everyone else is like that. And often we're just like two puppets interacting on the surface, but above it all, other things are pulling the strings. And what those things are in this metaphor are our views, basically. Our views and assumptions and opinions, they're the strings that pull us. They're the strings that cause us to react. They're the strings that cause us to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a kind of middle finger. Those views are the things that like activate us, pull us. And or another word to say is that's why we're compelled to act, I suppose, because those strings are pulling. And often they're unconscious, and that's the really dangerous thing about views, and that's why it's worth bothering dealing with views, is because just because you don't know what they are doesn't mean they're not there, and doesn't mean they're not acting through you. So I've got a quick framework for uncovering strings. I'm just looking at my notes and seeing that they're vague. So let's see if I can pull this off. So the framework is vision, principles, practicalities. Yeah, vision, principles, practicalities. So practicalities are the things that we do on the surface, that how we live, how like our actions, like our everyday stuff, how we get up in the morning, how we speak, that kind of thing. And they are informed by principles, which are in turn formed by our vision and our values about life. So an example would be, and it's not just us that has this framework, it's like institutions as well. So the Buddhist Centre, the Sheffield Buddhist Centre, practically we don't charge for any of our classes. So we've got a principle of generosity and a vision that generosity creates a community. So that's why we do it. So we want to create a community. We've got a principle of generosity, so we don't charge for classes. And that could include and then that sort of works into your personal life, or could be including your personal life or my personal life is, I get up to meditate. So that's a practicality. That's a principle because I want to practice the Dharma, and that's informed by a vision that I want to become enlightened. I want to become more kind, more wise. So often it's only the practicalities that we know about, and our principles and our visions are unknown. We're not clear about them. And they're informed by views that we're not sure. So we need to make those conscious. So these are the strongest strings that pull us, the visions and the principles, I would say. So one thing I can just throw in that's really, really helpful for this, that's from a guy called Stephen Covey, is what I'm going to call the funeral practice, which is to imagine you're at your own funeral and imagine you're hearing a eulogy from your friends, your family, and what you want them to say about you. So what you want them to say is is sort of shorthand for what your values are, what's most important to you, like what do you want to be remembered for? So you could take on the funeral practice and see how that goes. That can illuminate values. Okay, so I've talked about puppets, I've talked about strings, I've talked about vision, principles, practicalities. So how to get clear, how to move from like the vagueness, how to get more clarity, how to see the strings. So I'm going to say it's about questioning. It's about uncovering the correct question. So it's about learning how to ask yourself the right questions. Because if you get the right questions, then the answers speak for themselves. So often we go straight for answers, but the problem is we're too unclear about the question we're trying to answer. So the answer isn't anything to do with what we actually want to know. So get clear on the question. And I'm going to offer 6 ways that I have tried to do this over the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years. Trying to follow on from this like Amendus shake from Subhuti, which is you don't know anything, basically. You can't think. You need to learn how to think. So the first one, probably the most effective, is to find someone who knows how to think and ask them how they do it. So ask for thinking lessons. Thinking is a skill. And when I say thinking, it's more broad than just like, it's not like coldly intellectual. It includes the emotions. So it's not just about like playing chess or something. When I mean thinking, I mean it's like a whole sort of human intelligence. So find someone who embodies that and ask them how they do it, or spend time with them and just like learn from them. So that's been the most effective way I found, is find someone who knows how to think and then make sure I ask them to tell me. So I've been having thinking like discussions for about 3 years, really, really helpful. So the company that you keep. And then number 2, which I'm going to outrageously say might be even more important at some stages than a regular meditation practice. Looking at Shantikara, this is probably getting recorded. We might have to cut this out. Yeah, is remembering, the practice of remembering what happened to you yesterday. So it's remembering what you did and what the consequences of those actions were, and remembering what happened to you, like on Sunday, what was my week like? So that can really help you get clear on what views you have, how you act, what you're vague about, what you're ignoring, what you're obfuscating. So remember what happens to you in your life. Sounds really, really simple, but I recommend a practice of taking 20 minutes in the morning to remember what happened the day before, and not just remembering it, but what were the consequences of your actions in that day. So that'd be my 2 and 3. So remembering what happened and reflect on the consequences of your actions. Because it's a bit of a shame if we live our life and then sort of just like never quite catch up with it, forget to remember it. My 4th practice is to, I've called it find clean water sources, which is sort of code for find out where you think the truth is coming from. So it's very, very difficult to get clear about something if your source of information is contaminated with whatever, I won't name them because they're too many to name, but where do you think the best type of information comes from, the best type of knowledge? It's important to think about that, because what the water we drink from depends, colours our worldview, our whole worldview. So find clean water sources of information. And the 5th one is unclutter your life. So that's like from the range of like tidy your bedroom and do washing up, and like don't live in a total tip where you can't find anything. It's really difficult to think clearly if your life is just completely chaotic in that kind of way. Just get things in order generally. Don't have them like hanging around like stuff that's half done, and like 100 unreplied to WhatsApp messages, and like an email stuffed behind the sofa, and a bit of post like in your left-hand pocket. And it's all just very, very difficult to get clear if you've got kind of stuff everywhere. So click unclutter. Yeah. And then the last one, it probably is important as the first one, is patience. So this takes time. It takes time to do this kind of thing, and be patient with questions. So these things that I've been saying, these 6 things, help us uncover the right question. And once you think you've got the right question, be patient with it, entertain it, give it a 3-course meal, really get to know the question. Don't just kind of like squeeze an answer out of it because uncertainty is slightly uncomfortable. Basically, uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's much better to be clearly uncertain than certainly not right. Yeah. So just let it let the question kind of hang around for a while, months, years. It is worth it. Yes, because the opposite of vagueness is clarity, not certainty. So watching this film the other night, Dean Spanley, which is about someone who remembers he was a dog in a past life, just very entertaining. But a real sort of a standout quote was, "A certain mind is a closed mind." Yeah, a certain mind is a closed mind. So clarity is different to certainty. And it's likely, I'd wager, that the more certain you feel about something, if you're over 9 out of 10 certain about something, it's actually likely it's because you're not that clear on it. It's just you've jumped to certainty ahead of getting clear because, you needed to or whatever. So clarity is different to certainty. And what you think matters, it's worth getting clear because what you think matters. Or so much human suffering in the world is caused by terrible ideas. And ideas come from us. So what you think matters. And if you're a bit kind of vague, then basically what happens is you're at the mercy of people who aren't vague. You're at the mercy of people who are really, really clear or really, really certain. And you're not always sure why they're so certain and what they actually want. So it's worth you being certain to protect yourself against all the other certain people that in effect might not be practicing ethics, might not want the best for people. So it's a protection. So clarity is a protection. And then, yeah, my final point, I just want to say, I mean, I've called it buyer beware, which like, it's about, well, it's much easier to be a puppet. It's much easier to have strings and just be kind of pulled. And it's, and like when you really start going into this, going into what are your principles, what are your values, and digging them out and shining a light on them. Yeah, it's just really, really challenging. So you really need good friends, a good practice, a good meta practice, and a good community. But it's worth doing because the prize is freedom. That's the prize for clarity, freedom and real satisfaction, and everything that goes along with that.